Good day, everyone. J'ouvre maintenant la séance. Bienvenue à la...
I call this meeting to order. Welcome to meeting number 150 of the House of Commons Public Accounts Committee.
Pursuant to the standing orders, members are attending in person in the room and remotely using the Zoom application. Before we begin, I'd like to ask all in-person participants to read the guidelines written on the updated cards on the table. These measures are in place to help prevent audio feedback incidents and to protect the health and safety of all participants, especially our interpreters. A kind reminder to all those in person and online that for the safety of our interpreters, it is important that your microphone is muted when you're not speaking. Merci à tous pour la coopération.
Thank you for your cooperation.
Comments should be addressed through the chair. Conformément à l'article 108.3 du règlement.
Pursuant to Standing Order 1083, the committee is continuing its study on Report 1, ArriveCAN, sent to the committee on Monday, February 12, 2024.
All our witnesses from the Office of the Auditor General, Karen Hogan, Auditor General of Canada. Nice to see you again. Andrew Hayes, Deputy Auditor General as well. Good to have you back, sir. And Sami Hamouche, Principal. You've been in before. Good to see you again. And from the Department of Public Works and Government Services, Deputy Minister Ariane Reza. Nice to see you again. I know you've also been here previously, so nice to have you and your team back. Catherine Poulin, Assistant Deputy Minister, Departmental Oversight Branch, and Dominique Laporte, Senior Assistant Deputy Minister, Procurement Branch. Good to see you as well. So again, we're going to begin with opening remarks. Ms. Hogan, we'll
Point
kick
of order,
off.
Chair.
Oh, just 1 second, please, Ms. Hogan. We'll come right back to you.
Mr. Chair, today an explosive story hit from the Le Journal de Montréal. Headline reads, Minister Guilbeault holds financial interest in a firm linked to a controversial federal fund. His office flatly refuses to give details on the subject. As we all know, Minister Guilbeault has held a financial interest in Cycle Capital. Cycle Capital has received well over $600 million from the scandalous Green Slush Fund. He holds a financial interest as a minister. This committee passed a motion on October 7th, 2024. I'm asking for an update, Mr. Chair. Has he accepted our invitation to attend? He's got a lot of questions to answer. If he refuses to answer in the press, he will not be able to use that excuse here at committee.
Thank you, Mr. Brock. I'll provide just a brief update. So we have, the clerk and I have extended the committee's motion and request for the Environment Minister to appear. He has yet to do so. We have sent reminders, and we have made the committee available on dates of his choosing, but we have not heard a response in the affirmative yet.
Thank you, Chair.
And we will keep on it. Thank you very much for turning out to the business at hand. Ms. Hogan, you have the floor, please.
Mr. Chair, thank you for this opportunity to discuss our report on ArriveCAN. I want to begin by acknowledging that we are gathered on the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe people. Monsieur le Président, puisque nous avons...
Mr. Chair, we have been before this committee multiple times since last February, and so I will not be offering opening remarks today. However, you can refer to my previous speaking notes. That said, we will be pleased to respond to all of the questions from the members. Thank you. Thank you very much. That was very quick.
Reza, if you'd like to make an opening statement, you have the floor for up to 5 minutes, please. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't know if I can be as succinct as the Auditor General, but I will try. So, Mr. Chair, thank you for inviting us here today to discuss the procurement processes related to ArriveCAN. Let me begin by acknowledging we are gathered on the unceded territory of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe peoples. Joining me, as you noted earlier, is Monsieur Laporte and Madame Poulin, both of whom are Assistant Deputy Ministers at the PSPC. Mr. Chair, in addition to the measures I will describe momentarily, I want to acknowledge how frustrating it is for Canadians and parliamentarians alike not to hear simple and clear answers as it relates to ArriveCAN. On behalf of PSPC, we remain focused on reinforcing the integrity of the procurement process and what we need to do to regain the trust of Canadians. To do so, we need to demonstrate the system is fair, open, and transparent. The first contract associated with ArriveCAN was awarded in April 2020, in a period of great uncertainty and risk. 4.5 years later, we're still working with various independent reviewers and oversight bodies to understand the gaps that allowed this situation to occur and put in measures to prevent this from happening again. Dans ce contexte, Service Public
Public Service and Procurement Canada implemented oversight measures regarding the documentation of requirements and the decision-making for that supply. Last year, a measure was taken and suspended the powers of all organizations on acquiring services until they accept new conditions that were more rigorous and that they could show that they would be able to respect these measures. To this day, 90 departments and agencies, including the CBSA, signed these agreements that force them to include in bid requests measures to increase the transparency regarding prices and subcontracting.
we've made to address recommendations from the procurement ombuds and the Auditor General include, there's kind of 4 of them. First, improving evaluation requirements to more effectively validate that suppliers have the necessary qualifications and proven work experience. Second, improving documentation requirements to enhance the tracking of work progress and delivery timelines. Third, requiring clients to review invoices in greater details. And finally, PSPC is improving training and assistance for contracting authorities within both the PSPC and client departments. In addition, we've created the Contract Quality Assurance and Records Compliance Office to review the completeness and accuracy of files as a proactive measure to address documentation shortcomings. Mr. Chair, I would also like to say a few words regarding one of the methods of supply for professional services that has been the subject of much discussion in committee. The Task-Based Informatics Professional Services method of supply, or known as TBIPS as it's commonly known, enables the government to pre-qualify suppliers and categorize their services into specific streams, allowing us to efficiently match government needs with service providers. Through TBIPS, the government buys IT services such as software development, project management, cybersecurity, network support, database management, business analysis, quality assurance, and technical support for government departments. TBIPS supports the participation of small and medium-sized enterprises because it breaks down the projects into smaller task-based components, which provides more opportunities to compete for government contracts, which in turn is a key enabler of economic growth in Canada. Permettez-moi maintenant d'aborder les efforts.
Let me now move on to the efforts to detect fraud and other acts. As you know, thanks to our data, PSPC updated a number of fraudulent invoices sent to the Government of Canada through subcontractors. We have examined the amounts due to the government. PSPC undertook measures to increase oversight on the procurement process thanks to the implementation of the Integrity and Compliance Office. We are increasing our capacity for data analytics, but this office is also allowing us to better examine risks. This office will allow us to maintain the trust of Canadians in the process.
My department is responsible for managing procurements and establishing contracts on behalf of the departments and agencies, which collectively are worth $27 billion each year. We take this responsibility seriously, and I know that our procurement officers work diligently every day to fulfill these important responsibilities. We remain committed to working to continue to improve and safeguard the integrity of the government procurement system, and I close where I left off. The trust of parliamentarians and Canadians and the integrity of the procurement system needs to be reinforced to become open, fair, and transparent once again.
Thank you very much, Ms. Reza. Appreciate those opening comments. Turning now to our first round, 4 members, 6 minutes each. Mr. Brock, you'll lead things off for us today.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you to all the witnesses for your attendance today and your previous attendance at numerous committees. What we are talking about today, at least from my perspective, is the ongoing examination, prosecution of the ArriveCAM scandal. It clearly exposed the failures of Canada's broken procurement system and the fraudulent misuse of hard-earned taxpayer funds. One consistent response I get from Canadians from coast to coast is they're demanding accountability, they're demanding consequences, and they're demanding recovery. So it is those two latter points, consequences and recovery, which would be the focus of my first round of questions. Ms. Reza, Deputy Minister Reza, you've appeared numerous times at this committee and also government operations. A question was put to you when you appeared last June at government operations with respect to the total cases of contracting fraud that had been referred to lawful authorities, particularly the RCMP. I have your response to that particular question, and you said, we have previously referred many fraudulent overbilling cases from 2022, 2023, 2024 to the RCMP, but it was devoid of details. So I'm asking you if you could explain what you meant about we have previously referred many cases. What does that mean? Can you give me a number, please?
I certainly will. And I want to give you, thank you very much for your question, Mr. Chair, a baseline. The procurement system in the Government of Canada, both at PSPC and more broadly, does about 400,000 procurement transactions. So those are contracts and contracts amendments. Since 2022, under the auspices of PSPC, we've started to use data analytical and mining approaches to be able to look at contracting data. Since that time, and I think that we'll have to break it into two, at that time when I indicated the ones that had been referred, it was 4 cases that had been referred. That was from 2022. We provided in camera to OGO the names that were referred to RCMP.
Okay.
Since that time, there's been 3 further referrals in October to the RCMP for similar overbilling to the Government of Canada.
Okay, so that's 7 in total?
That is correct.
Okay, and that's for the year 2024, or does that include that years from 2022 to 2024?
It includes everything that we found since 2022. We're
Okay.
constantly looking, but this is what's been found to date.
All right. You gave us the names. There was a little bit of pushback, I believe, particularly from Ms. Poulin. There was some pushback. Eventually, you gave us the names. I would like the names then of those additional 4 referrals. If you have that information now, please share. If you need to table it at a later date, I'll allow you to do that. Is that something that you're prepared to do?
Absolutely. When it was asked last time, we provided it within 21 days. We will provide it in the same format to this committee.
Okay. Thank you for that. I'm also mindful of the fact that Minister Duclos, in late spring, in addition to Minister Anand, was quite concerned about the level of contracting fraud with subcontractors and indicated that the initial 3 was simply the first wave of suspected fraudulent billing. He did indicate very clearly that there would be additional waves. So do I take that to mean the 4 additional referrals represent that additional wave?
My high-level understanding, we can get some details from Madame Poulin.
Thank you for the question. So the referral that has been made in October are 3. So there's 3 new cases, and this represents the second wave of fraudulent billing cases.
And will there be further waves? Are you still examining in fine detail from top to bottom any other potential criminality, particularly in contracting?
So let me start by answering this. It's going to be something that is evergreen, ongoing. So we look for the best ways to inform Canadians and parliamentarians on it, but to think that it's one wave after another, as I indicated, we do 400,000 procurement transactions a year. We've started to really review it using data analytics. We have, since 2022, now found a total of 7 cases. We can talk about restitutions. It would be inconceivable to me not to think that we are going to continue to do this type of work and continue to uncover overbilling.
Okay. So dovetailing on the Auditor General's report, which provided some detailed examples of potential criminality, in my respective opinion, about certain contractors, GC Strategies, Government of Canada Strategies being one of them, Christian Firth, completely under RCMP investigation. In fact, it had his home raided the night before he was to testify at the bar of the House of Commons. He's definitely looking at fraudulent charges. So the question of recovery, there was a motion that was passed in the House towards the latter end of the last session, which demanded that the government provide details as to what steps they were taking for recovery. I have since asked a number of ministers through a very number of mediums as to what steps they're taking to recover, and I never get a clear answer, no answer at all. So, Ms. Reza, what instructions have you been given by Minister Duclos or any other minister or the Prime Minister or the PMO's office in terms of recovery efforts?
In terms of recovery efforts, we have made the commitment to the minister to look at how we can recover the funds that were spent on the contract. We have written to GC Strategies and other companies, as it relates to ArriveCan, to put them on notice that we're reviewing it and working with CBSA. CBSA is the client in this. We're helping them go through invoices. We're helping them to look at whether there was overbilling or fraud. Let me pause here. Est-ce que tu as quelque chose à rajouter?
No, I think the answer is completed. So each client department is responsible to recover the funds if they think they have been fraudulently overbilled or if they haven't received the service for which they paid for.
Thank you. That is the time, Mr. Brock. Moving on to Ms. Yip now. You have the floor for 6 minutes, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, witnesses, for coming today. Ms. Reza, I'm wondering if you could tell us a bit about your background in procurement.
Okay, I started in 2016, in December 2016, and I have to say I won a competition and I was appointed to be the ADM of procurement. I had to look up what exactly procurement meant, not from a tendering perspective, but a contract life cycle, looking at the different elements of it. So I've been at PSPC since 2016 in a variety of roles, and at the end of the month, I will be hopefully celebrating 1 year as being the deputy of PSPC. So my experience is now not limited to procurement per se, but looking across the business lines and the back office functions of the government of Canada.
Where were you employed before your role at PSPC?
I've been a public servant for approximately 27 years. I started my career at Health. I went to central agencies, spent some time at Treasury Board, and then I spent 9 to 10 years at Canada Border Services Agency, where I had a responsibility from everything from regions, so being operationally responsible for the front line, to some of the headquarter work.
Could you tell us how long Diane Daly worked at PSPC?
That I would have to come back to you, Ms. Daly, unless one of my colleagues knows it. Ms. Daly, I believe, worked at PSPC until 2018. I think she started in 2008 as a senior procurement officer, and in 2018 she went on secondment, which is like going on an assignment in the government of Canada to go to CBSA. She recently returned to us mid-summer 2023.
And what was the working relationship like with Ms. Daly?
I'm sorry, I'm not, I've never met Ms. Daly. I've never worked with her directly. I have no information. I don't know if any of my colleagues, if you would like to know what she does at PSPC in terms of her responsibilities.
Yes, happy to jump. So in. So Mrs. Daly is a PG5. So and she was based, and before she was with the real property sector of our department. So with procurement.
And I think we use the term classifications. The PG5 is a relatively senior officer, has authority to award contracts up to $30 million, to set up supplier arrangements. This is someone with a lot of training and expertise to offer.
Ms. Poulin and Mr. Laporte, did any of you have a working relationship with Ms. Daly?
Merci pour la question, Monsieur le Président. No, I have not had any relationship with Mrs. Daly within PSPC.
Thank you. I never met or talked to Mrs. Daly also.
I'm sure you've read the Auditor General's report on ArriveCan. And do you agree, Ms. Reza, with her findings and recommendations?
I absolutely agree. As an individual and as the deputy head of PSPC, we have responded. We've responded to the recommendation that was really focused on PSPC. There was a whole series of recommendations. One was directed to us. We have put in a lot of controls, a lot of review now of having the oversight, the transparency, the documentation. From my perspective, you asked me about being in procurement. We perennially fall down on file records. With a new e-procurement system, with a new compliance structure to make sure there's full file reviews for decision-making and accountability, we're really hoping to be able to turn the corner and provide more confidence in that file management.
Filing was the most pressing of the recommendations, or is that what you've prioritized?
Well, I wouldn't say it's the most pressing. I would say that and maybe we can turn here to the Auditor General, but from my perspective, really the roles and responsibilities between client and procurement department, understanding, I think that you pointed out to us that we had challenge function a lot of the decision, and I think that there's a lot of gray space when we need to figure out how to proceed in terms of decision making. May I turn here to the AG to see?
Thank you. So I think a number of our recommendations deal with fundamental findings and areas for improvement. I say fundamental because they should be in place. For example, the importance of documenting the procurement file, the importance of ensuring that records relating to the payment of invoices are clear and that coding of expenses are clear, the importance of conflict of interest forms and the importance of proper project management documents like budgets and oversight evidence. Those were the focus of many of our recommendations, and I would say that it's difficult to put one as a priority. They are all important.
So an action plan has been put in place.
Maybe we can describe that because it's actually the most rigorous action plan we've put in place, and we're hoping that it'll yield value to the departments, to PSPC. And I'm going to turn here to.
Yeah, we took several measures. Several measures have been put in place in light of the OAG report on ArriveCan. I would say task authorization, they are clearly defined. And in the past, maybe we had task authorization that were vague. So now it's clearly defined. Our deputy spoke about the huge effort that we've done in terms of quality assurance and records compliance. So we've done 3 cycles of review, and 450 files have been reviewed by directors. So the directors themselves are now committed personally to look into the file, make sure that the appropriate information is there. So it's been basically, we learned from some of the challenge that we were confronted with the OAG report. And I would say also a big key takeaways is the challenge function that PSPC is playing. I would say that our procurement officers, I'm asking them to challenge the client. If, for example, we have concern with a procurement strategy that is brought forward, a non-competitive, please go ahead, challenge your client. Make sure that the procurement strategy is documented, that it's on file. So a lot of key takeaways that have been implemented in light of this OAG report.
Thank you very much. That is your time, Monsieur. Suivant, c'est Madame Sinclair.
Next, we have Ms. Sinclair Desgagnés for 6 minutes. Thank you to the witnesses for being with us today. I think that we're getting to the end of our study on ArriveCan about a year later. It's a good time to look back on what has been done. Many measures were announced when the AG's report was tabled, and about a year later we should be seeing the results. So that's what I'll focus on to start. But before that, I found Ms. Yip's question very interesting. Ms. Reza, you worked with the Border Services Agency before going to PSPC. The issues raised by the Auditor General in her report, those issues couldn't have started in 2016. They were probably caused by processes that existed, that were probably there when you were at the CBSA. And I'll quote the Auditor General, and if ever I make any mistakes, please let me know. But she said that it was the worst bookskeeping that she has seen in her career. that probably didn't start in 2016. Had you noticed those same issues? Thank you for the question. I would like to start by saying I didn't have that experience at CBSA. I was an interim assistant deputy minister. I looked at the border for travelers, and I was focusing on the budget, and so I didn't notice those things, but there were contracts awarded, and now I'm responsible for contracts for professional services, but that wasn't a contract for ArriveCan. It was a contract to have more consultants in order to assist. Yes, but ArriveCan is only the tip of the iceberg for bookkeeping, and those issues probably existed beyond that singular project. It was a significant issue within the CBSA, so I'm surprised that your experience was so fundamentally different. Usually, an organization isn't going to have only one small team. There will be different teams that will have to work on things at different levels. So I'm a little bit shocked. We've also heard allegations during our study regarding a toxic culture at the CBSA. You were there at the same time as Luc Sabourin. Are you aware of that situation? You've never heard of Luc Sabourin? Only through your comments, but I never heard of him when I was at the agency. I think he arrived after me, between 2009 and 2016. I'm not saying that there's a link between you and him, but you were not aware of that situation? All right. Because he raised a toxic culture. So we've seen a toxic culture with human resources and criminal behavior and the RCMP's investigation that is ongoing and deplorable bookkeeping. So there are a lot of issues at CBSA that probably didn't start after you left. I would like to add that even internal data, and I mean all departments have the public service employee results, and they're always quite low, and that's always concerning. There are a lot of agents that are frontline service workers, and so there's always a concern there. Thank you for the answer. If we look at PSPC, you've already mentioned a few measures that were implemented, some agreements with businesses. You suspended the possibility for certain departments to award contracts without everything being done correctly. Are you seeing results of these measures? Are there departments that have shared any feedback? Do you have any data to share with us? Yes. I have two answers. First, regarding the culture change for procurement, and secondly, on restitution. I will ask my colleague to respond. Thank you for the question. We were able to do some cost recovery, about $800 million, and $380,000 for which we have agreements currently being finalized. This is aligned with the 3 fraudulent billing cases that were announced in March 2024. What company, or can you tell us? Unfortunately, that's confidential and could compromise the restitution agreements that are being negotiated. Most people that we speak to and that we are seeking restitution from will cooperate. They understand the importance of having a good relationship with the federal government and understand their responsibilities regarding contracts. They're not necessarily pleased to speak with us for cost recovery, but we are successful and we are satisfied. It used to be up to each department to do that cost recovery, and it wasn't efficient. And we asked to take that responsibility on. And we have sought to have cost recovery for all of that. I'm very proud of our procurement agents. There's a lot more transparency. There's an obligation now. A provider must indicate who the subcontractors are. With ArriveCan, we saw that the description was very vague. And I'm happy to say that we raised a lot of awareness with our clients, and the Treasury Board helped us as well. And managers must define their needs, and they're responsible for their budget. So we've been working with a TBS that created guidelines for managers. 450 files were assessed with a high rate of compliance, and if there is improvement needed, we have a very constructive approach with our procurement agents. We have checklists to ensure that all of the information required in a file is there. And so the culture change is impressive. And we've got about 1,000 procurement agents that have done training on file management. And so I think that everything's going in the right direction. Thank you very much.
Ms. Zerillo joining us online. Welcome to the committee. Ms. Zerillo, you have the floor for 6 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And my questions today will be to Witness Hogan. There are so many additional important issues that the Auditor General's office needs to audit to serve Canadians with better transparency and oversight. And one of those that I and my NDP colleagues are seized with is the financialization of housing and how the federal pension plans are contributing to the displacement of renters through the PSP-IB as they contract out landlords to manage their multifamily real estate assets. So I wanted to refer to the Public Sector Pension Investment Board Special Examination Report out of Witness Hogan's office in 2021. And within there, we know that the PSP-IB is a Crown corporation. And within that report, it was stated that during our audit, the TB Secretariat communicated the government's funding risk tolerance and long-term real rate of return objectives for the pension asset that the corporation managed. So they were told what those risk tolerances and rate of return objectives were. Now, in the report, it says the government's real rate of return objective was 3.6% for the following 10 years and 4% thereafter. That was in 2021. Today, just recently, the PSP Investment Board annual report reports that their 10-year net annualized return is 8.3%, over double those objectives. And those returns are partially coming off the backs of displaced renters. And in fact, Acorn Canada protests that the Public Sector Pension Investment Board's stake in exploitative financialized housing is causing harm. If we think about the PSP Investment Board being one of the largest billion-dollar corporate financialized landlords, it certainly requires oversight, as this is happening under the government's watch. And who is oversighting for renters and protecting people from private investment and tactics like the PSP Investment Board is engaging in? And I would say that they're engaging in it because we know that according to documents released in response to an access to information request recently, that the PSP Investments owns around half of Starlight Toronto portfolio. And Starlight is actually Starlight Investments, one of the largest landlords in Canada, a privately held real estate investment and asset manager that manages over 65,000 units. Yet prior to founding Starlight, their CEO ran TransGlobe, which earned a reputation for ignoring tenants' requests for maintenance and faced hundreds of charges for failing to do repairs and violations of fire code. Starlight also has applied for more above-guideline rent increases than any other landlord in Toronto, and was one of the top evictors during the pandemic and has targeted tenant organizers with evictions. Witness Hogan, this is the government's partner in their pension funds. Are you aware of this reality?
So, Mr. Chair, I pride myself on coming prepared to answer just about any question that a committee member may have, and I have to admit I did not anticipate this. I would offer up that I will happily consult with my audit team on the PSPIB special examination, including the joint auditor. This is an audit that we do jointly with the private sector, and I can provide a written response back to you, Mr. Chair, that you could share with the committee member.
I think that'd be fine. Yes, Mrs. Cirillo, you have the floor again.
Thank you. So from the Hill Times, the very pensioners that this fund is supposed to protect are asking for oversight. So I'm happy to hear this from Witness Hogan, and I'll be looking forward to that. Unions are urging the public sector pension fund not to pursue rent increases, mass evictions at Toronto apartment buildings. And a union representing the federal public servant says that the pension fund that manages its members' retirement savings has joined with one of Canada's largest real estate firms to evict tenants who are resisting proposed rent increases at 3 rental buildings in Toronto. Union representatives and tenant organizations have criticized the public section pension investment board and its operational arm for its role in the joint venture with Starlight Investments, a global asset management company that is one of the largest privately held real estate firms in Canada. So I want to share, Witness Hogan, and I want to ask this question. I've tried to reach out to the board chair, the newly appointed board chair, and I have been refused a number of times any access to the PSP investment board chair. They've pushed me off to some other operational pieces. Obviously, there is no accountability for Canadians. So I just wanted to understand, why is it that a parliamentarian is not allowed access to this board of this Crown Corporation when this is exactly who they report to? They report to parliamentarians.
Mr. Chair, I think I echo the fact that the board of directors really oversees the operation of the Crown Corporation. The Crown Corporation is an arm removed from the government, while they do ultimately account back to the government. What I could offer up and encourage, if this committee or another parliamentary committee would like to study our special examination and invite witnesses from the Crown Corporation and our office and the joint auditors, I'm sure that we would all be prepared to support the committee in studying important matters linked to PSPIB.
Thank you very much. And that is the time for that exchange. Beginning our second round, Mr. McCauley, you have the floor for 5 minutes, please.
Thanks, Chair. Witnesses, welcome. Ms. Reza, one of your previous appearances, you noted GC Strategies had been given a suspension for 180 days. As the 180 days is up, are they still suspended?
They are no longer eligible to do business with the government of Canada. I think they're permanently removed.
So they've been permanently removed?
I'm just going to confirm this, so I don't... Vas-y.
Merci pour la question. From a contract security program, GC Strategies no longer hold a security clearance with the program. It means that they cannot access secure procurement on our side.
Access any other procurement?
I will turn to my colleague.
Thank you. They've been disqualified, so there was a breach of the Code of Conduct for Procurement, so they've been disqualified from all the supplier arrangements, so this usually apply across also all the departments. So,
How many companies similar to them have been suspended? Either or lost security and therefore cannot bid, or lost access because of misconduct?
those that I'm aware, we have 3 companies. We have Dalian, Coradix, as well as GC Strategy. So those were the 3 that have been suspended. I would need to go back to the record in terms of providing you with an exact number and exact time frame. But since February, March, those were the 3 companies.
I would assume plus the companies involved with the ones that have been referred to the RCMP as well, have they not?
Perhaps I can take a crack at answering that. I wanted to distinguish that when it comes to overbilling and time theft, it is usually at the resource level. So the supplier, although through the code of conduct, they're held
So these are
responsible.
subcontractors have
These
been
are
referred to the RCMP, and
And the suppliers.
there are systems set up to ensure that these subcontractors are never
That's,
used again.
that's, so we're mapping out through, as I've indicated, this is a whole new set of, first is to find them, to refer them, to get restitution, and to put up, what is their requirement? They lose their security clearances. There's other elements to it, depending on whether it was an error, they're paying it back. So it's not a one-size-fit-all.
Thanks. And you did mention restitution. The comment to my colleague, Ms. Sinclair Deganay, was restitution agreements being negotiated. Why would we be negotiating restitution if they owe taxpayers money? Would it not be you overbilled us, pay us back, period?
So as a result of the time theft, we've reached out to the suppliers. They themselves don't know. We've given them a methodology for the money they owe.
Okay.
We've started.
Sorry, let me stop you there. When you say you reached out, sorry, gentlemen. You say you reached out to suppliers about time theft. So this is money stolen from taxpayers. And you're saying they don't know. Why are we at the point of even having such a discussion? If we've identified time theft, therefore money stolen from taxpayers, should we not be just stating to these suppliers, here is the bill, pay us back immediately?
Do you want to take?
Thank you so much for the question. In fact, it's exactly what we have done. So
Okay,
we
well,
wrote them a
Let me
letter.
just stop you there then. You said that you're negotiating restitution agreements.
So this is the settlement agreement that goes with the payment. So we told them, please pay us that money. They are paying back, but they are putting legal condition on the confidentiality of the agreement, the fact that they are not agreeing to their liability. I think there's a specific word. They are saying, this do not constitute an admission of a liability, but because we want to keep our relationship with you, we understand that it's our responsibility as part of the contract. So here's your money. It's the full amount of the money that have been overbilled.
How is the government, from subcontractors, how is the government finding time theft, but the main contractor is not?
So
Like, I understand what you're saying, that the company is saying, well, we're not liable, and, we're not admitting guilt, but if the time theft happened, did it not happen through the contractor, therefore billing the taxpayer?
So maybe I have to explain a little bit more what those overbilling cases are about. So it's individual. So people that through multiple contracts with multiple departments are concurrently billing the same hour of work.
Right, which sounds like fraud.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
and that's
let
why
me just stop you.
Quick
If it's
question, Mr.
fraud,
McCauley.
Why is this not going directly to the RCMP and the money being demanded back immediately instead of a negotiation?
So we should forget the word negotiation in that because they had paid back the entire amount. They're negotiating the terms of the settlement. These are two different concepts.
I'm stunned that
Thank you.
people are frauding us,
Thank
but we're
you.
giving them
Thank you
terms.
very much, Mr.
Thanks.
McCauley. That is your time. Suivant, up next, c'est Monsieur Drouin.
Mr. Drouin, you have 5 minutes.
Mr. Chair, merci. Just a quick question to Ms. Reza with regards to, and I think you've alluded to this in your opening statements with procurement vehicles, and I think you've mentioned TBIPs, and I'm just wondering, in ArriveCAN's case, TBIPs, was that a procurement vehicle that was used for that?
Thank you very much for the question. I think what's interesting is that there were, I think, 3 or 4 sole source contracts where TBIPs was not used. And that is actually, in hindsight, one of the key issues. Had it gone through TBIPs, we may have had a very different outcome. The contract that was in the Auditor General's report, as well as the Procurement Ombudsman report, where there was some irregularities, is actually through TBIPs, and work is underway there. in general, TVIPS does a lot of business. There's a lot of control and oversight over it. There are two separate kind of streams, one that's open to all vendors that are on the list. The list is periodically updated. And I think it's an interesting opportunity as well to understand that there's a whole continuum of suppliers, from the micro suppliers with the 1 to 4 employees to the ones that are very large firms. And we actually recently did an overview of kind of the number of Canadians employed on government contracts through SME's lens and through TVIPS. I think all professional services was 280,000 Canadians were employed through providing service and SMEs to the government of Canada through this vehicle.
So I know through the Auditor General's report that obviously we've read on Report 1, there's a bit of back and forth between PSPC and CBSA as to, I think PSPC's role is always to push their clients to move to a competitive process. But CBSA at the time had said, well, we don't have time for that. So TBIPS, when vendors are registered on TBIPS, does that shorten the procurement cycle? Or is that, do we embark on a song and dance with an open competitive process after we're on the supply arrangement?
Yeah, thank you for the question. So it does indeed shorten the procurement process, because usually you would have to post for at least 40 days. So you would need to solicit solicitation, so that would take time. So having pre-qualified suppliers really fast-track the procurement process. So indeed.
There's an efficiency to having it, and they've already gone through some of the solicitation, and they also have to guarantee various insurance, capacity, security elements. So it certainly does accelerate it, which is why almost all professional services go through TBIPS or a supply arrangement of that nature. And the fact that there wasn't a case of CBSA staff augmentation in April 20, it is really almost unique during the pandemic.
Okay, thanks. Maybe over to the Auditor General. Je poserai plutôt ma question. Je sais que vous allez faire l'analyse des...
I know you talked about contracts with GC Strategies, and that's since 2011, but will you look at the procurement used? Will you look at whether or not it was efficient? Did they complete the tasks that were assigned to them? Is that going to be part of the audit, or just the contracts that were signed, and if they were done competitively? We let Parliament know that we would be looking into other contracts awarded to GC Strategies and other businesses linked to GC Strategies. We haven't yet decided the scope and how far back we will be verifying or looking into. And we don't know which departments or Crown Corps will be included, but we will be looking at ArriveCan and professional contracts and try to see if there are any similar shortcomings with the contracts awarded to GC Strategies. Once we have an idea of the scope and the deadlines, we will be communicating with Parliament and we'll be letting you know. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, you did a few seconds left. I'll add it on if you're running a little late next time. Suivant, c'est Madame Sinclair Desgagnés pour 2 minutes 30 secondes.
Ms. Sinclair Desgagnés for 2.5 minutes. If we look at the measures taken, I think Monsieur Laporte, you were the last to speak on this. You were saying that you were proud of certain procurement agents. What about Crown corporations that had awarded contracts and who also had certain irregularities? Thank you, Mr. Chair. I haven't heard any negative or positive information regarding Crown corporations. We're working closely with departments that use our procurement tools. Usually Crown corporations will have their own processes. That's why we are less... During the pandemic, there were also irregularities with Crown corporations. Some have been studied. And if you haven't heard of it yet, I imagine you will soon. And one example that comes to mind is contracts awarded to Accenture for QEC by Export Development Canada. It requires a reform for CEBA, rather. Is your mandate focused only on departments and agencies? We work with departments and organizations that use our procurement. The answer is no, then. Yes, it's no. Apologies, I just have a lot of questions and not a lot of time. I talked about these non-competitive contracts. I feel like I've never gotten a real answer. Since 2016, the non-competitive contracts have increased. We're talking about 30%. That's what we had for 2023. Non-competitive contracts compared to competitive ones. And it's the ArriveCan report that allowed us to dig deeper and discover just how deep the issue was. And by having a more systemic way of doing things, it would be better for taxpayers. So what are you doing concretely? To start, our department looks for 80% of contracts being competitive. I'm looking at our data. We've heard a lot about 70% and 30%. We're at about 80%. I'm relieved if it's higher. We have contracts that are high value, and so what you've raised is very important. And we want to see what we can do to always have a reasonable goal, about 80-85%. We always try to work with clients as well. We want this competition to be the standard. But for some cases, there are products where IP is important, there's military procurement that would force us to have non-competitive contracts, but we do want to follow the rules for contracting, and we always try to respect agreements as well. If I can add, no, apologies, you don't have any time left. You'll have to come back to it later. Thank you. Next.
Ms. Zerillo again for 2.5 minutes, please. You have the floor.
Thank you so much. And my questions are for Witness Hogan again. And just in light of the multitude of audits that are required by your department and your office that protect Canadians, I'm wondering if you think that this is a good use of taxpayers' money, but also your time to have you appear over and over here again. I understand, you took less time this time because you have been here so many times, because there are so many topics that matter to Canadians. So I wonder if you wouldn't mind sharing, if you think this is a good use of taxpayers' money and time, and then what will be the next update in regards to the ArriveCan? What are the dates and things that are coming? And then what is next for Canadians and for parliamentarians to hear from in your office in regards to audits? What's next? What's coming?
So it is my responsibility as Auditor General of Canada to serve Parliament and support the House and the Senate, and I will appear as many times as committees invite me. I think it's very important for us to talk about our work. The more we can talk about our work, the more committees are interested in our work. I hope the more positive and swift change will happen across the public service to improve the lives of Canadians. So I'm always happy to be here. As when it comes to ArriveCan, we at this moment are not planning on following up fulsome on that audit. I do talk with Deputy Minister Reza occasionally around the progress they're making. We are finding a way, we are looking at a way within our office to see how we can follow up on a more regular basis on many of the recommendations that we have issued. But I would expect that the Public Accounts Committee will ask for regular updates on the detailed management action plan that was provided here. When it comes to work coming up, I am expected to table some reports, hopefully in December. That is our plan. The exact date is what we're trying to iron out. But there is 5 audits that are coming up. I'm trying to remember what they all are on, but for sure, I think one is on the Canada Emergency Business Account, so CEBA is coming up. There is something on digital identity, the programs for seniors, the Canada Summer Jobs Program, as well as industrial technological benefits. So those would be the 5 reports that will be tabled in the winter.
Thank you very much. That is the time. Mr. Genuis, you're up. You have the floor for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Chair. A quick question to the officials to start off with. Ballpark, how much has the government lost as a result of contracting fraud in the last 9 years?
I don't think we have figures that go back 9 years. We can try to come back with an answer. We can tell you that from what we've seen in our referrals to the RCMP, we're at 4.5 million and counting.
I mean, that's in specific referrals to the RCMP, but we've talked about so many other practices that are fraudulent. Do you have a ballpark sense of how much has been lost as a result of misrepresentation, breaking of various kinds of rules?
Merci pour la question. I do not have such information.
Okay. If you can try to come back to the committee with that, I'll move on. The Arrive Scam contractor GC Strategies has gotten a lot of attention. Dalian has gotten comparatively less, even though Dalian is also a 2-person company involved in the contract. They appear to have also done no actual work on the app. Dalian had been identified by the government as an Indigenous company, and they operated in joint venture with Corodex, which allowed Corodex, a larger non-Indigenous company, to get contracts under the Indigenous set-aside. Dalian has now, though, been removed from the Indigenous business list. Can our officials advise why Dalian was removed from the Indigenous business list? Were they never Indigenous? Did they cease to be Indigenous? What happened there?
Thank you very much for the question. I believe this was raised at OGO with my colleague Gina Wilson. She answered the question as they are the owner of the Indigenous Business Directory and is best placed to answer those questions of indigeneity. What I took from the testimony was that they no longer met the corporation structure.
Yeah, the testimony we heard from Indigenous Services officials was, quote, "We noted that Globe and Mail interviews with Dalian referred to changes in his corporation. That affected the 51% owned and controlled scenario. That was part of the reason we had to remove his business from the directory." So can I ask, is the Globe and Mail your usual source for information about who is and is not considered to be eligible for certain procurement programs?
Thank you very much for the question. In the case of the Indigenous service list or Indigenous business list, our source of authority on indigeneity and whether or not they can be on the list is ISK. We get our procurement
I guess what
authority.
I'm asking just is more generally, like, what was shocking to me about that testimony is it's like officials telling us, well, we pick up the Globe and Mail, we read it, and that's our source for information for deciding eligibility for these procurement programs. It seems to me like the government should have a way of getting information to verify procurement requirements rather than hoping that a shady contractor would make the mistake of revealing information to the newspaper. Does this strike you as kind of a flaw in the system?
Well, I can describe, if you permit, some of the work that we do before we do business with a vendor from a procurement perspective, if that's reasonable. We do.
Well, I guess I'm just looking for information about, like, the sources of information for this kind of verification.
What we can do is also, oftentimes, they're going to be referred to ISK. So our procurement officer, in the course of their business dealing, they're going to be proactively referring contract for post-award audit to ISK, and ISK will undertake those audits. Also, in the case of Dalian, it's interesting to note that the reason why they got suspended at first, also, irrespective of the IBD, was that they found themselves in a conflict of interest situation. So,
I agree there were other problems, but they were taken off that list. I'll just say on Indigenous procurement, very clearly we have the sort sort of Spider-Man meme happening where procurement officials are pointing at ISK and ISK is pointing back at procurement. I asked a question in the House about this, and it was your minister, the procurement minister, who responded to it. So I wonder if this is why Indigenous leaders are telling us the program is such a mess. It's because you have kind of this ministers' departments pointing at each other and not getting it done. On this point, I want to ask the Auditor General quickly. You've been asked by Indigenous leaders to investigate abuses of the Indigenous procurement program, abuses that Indigenous leaders say are rampant. Can you give us an update on your plans and prospective timelines around investigating the Indigenous procurement program?
So we have begun the work on the Indigenous procurement, and we're looking at either the fall of 2025, spring of 2026 to make that report public. I think it'll depend on access to information and timing. So, but it's in the works. It's begun.
Any way you can get that out, say by August of 2025? I think Indigenous leaders say that a majority of these contracts are problematic. So I think it's the sort of thing that Canadians might want to see before having to make any major decisions.
I don't think I have the parliamentary calendar committed to memory, but I do not believe Parliament sits in August, and Parliament needs to be sitting for me to be able to provide reports.
Thank you. That is the time. Up next is Mr. Erskine Smith. You have the floor for 5 minutes, please.
Thanks very much, Chair. I want to start, Auditor General. You testified previously on ArriveCan. I was not here when you testified, and I know there have been many, many meetings on ArriveCan at this committee. It strikes me as odd, though, that from what I can glean from the evidence and testimony after all those meetings, we still don't. I still don't know. At least maybe someone knows who is ultimately responsible for having approved. Where does culpability lie here on an individual basis? So we've got Cameron McDonald and Antonio Utano on the one hand. There have been allegations as against Mindone, and all the reviews that you've done. I mean, can you give us a read from your perspective, given you've done a deeper dive than we have?
Mm-hmm. So I think I would start off by a general statement, and then I'll give you a bit more details. But when so much goes wrong, I think every layer of management has to take some responsibility for the significant weaknesses that we found, whether it be in procurement, contract management, project management, budget management, record keeping. So there's many layers, I think, of management that need to take responsibility here. But when it comes to who actually decided that GC Strategies was the right vendor, it's a question that we were not able to answer, but I can tell you that there was a contract requisition, which was the document that indicates that a contract should be issued, which was signed by the executive director over at CBSA. And I think every public servant needs to know when they exercise their delegated responsibility that signing your name to something comes with accountability and responsibility. And if you feel that you're being pressured or you're not at ease with signing that document, then you should raise that with your supervisors. There are mechanisms in place, and that you shouldn't sign something that you're uncomfortable signing. But in this case, the executive director signed the contract requisition.
And just to follow up on that, I think you're right. So the buck has to stop somewhere, and if someone's putting their name to something, ultimately approving something, there is responsibility, certainly. When it comes to those sort of potential for intentional deceit here, where you have individuals who are potentially taking kickbacks, potentially then framing a requisition to cater to a particular vendor. That may, in this case, we've got Cameron McDonald and Antonio Utano on the one hand, where there does appear to be a closer relationship with Christian Firth and GC Strategies. What can you say about that?
I think when we did this audit, we didn't uncover evidence of criminality, but we did speak with the RCMP. The RCMP was already investigating a different allegation that involved the same branch at the CBSA, similar vendors and similar individuals. So we've had that conversation, and I leave the decision to intent or collusion or fraud to the RCMP to determine.
That's fair. So my last question then is in relation to closer to home and with respect to your role, which is you've issued recommendations, the government's acted or is acting on those recommendations. And in your view today, in terms of your assessment, are you comfortable with where the government is? Would you have criticisms in terms of how they have responded? How would you grade their response?
So I'll keep it limited to contracting because there are so many audits that we issue and so many recommendations that we issued. I think when it comes to ArriveCan, and I will also bring in the work that we did on professional services contracts, we saw the departments in question act during our audit, provide clarification, for example, on the use of national master standing offers while we were doing our work. So there was swift reaction. I have said throughout these two audits that I don't believe it's that more rules are needed, but that the existing rules need to be better applied. And so I'm very happy to see that training is happening and that individuals are taking it and hopefully will apply it. I do still believe the government needs to take a step back and say, over the course of so many decades of my office issuing audits and internal audits or the procurement ombuds doing work, and we always add recommendations which seem to add more layers of rules, I think it's time to step back and say, do we have too many rules that have been overtaken by events, and simplify perhaps some of the complexity of the rules so that everyone can understand them and apply them better. I'm not exactly sure why all of these situations are happening. Is it for speed to move around the rules? Is there too many rules? What exactly it is needs to be ironed out, but taking swift action is always something we're pleased to see.
Thank you very much.
Thanks very much.
Beginning our third round, Mr. Brock, you have the floor for 5 minutes.
Madame Poulin, I think the collective jaws of all concerned taxpayers hit the floor in your response to my colleague, Mr. McCauley, about the Government of Canada working with fraudsters to pay back illegally, in my view, obtained taxpayer funds. So I'm going to do a deeper dive on this. How did you distinguish between working with potential fraudsters and those individuals that you referred directly to the RCMP? What was the metric by which you determined I'll work with them on a civil basis versus a criminal basis?
Donc, en fait, il est important de mentionner
It's important to mention that investigations were carried out on the people who were subcontractors. Fraud and other criminal elements are linked to those people's actions. No criminal action was discovered with the prime contracts.
You're not a criminal investigator. You have responded to Mr. McCauley that the individuals you are working with in terms of a repayment agreement, having them sign a document that absolves them of any liability, any criminality, any responsibility. In essence, they chose intentionally to double, triple, perhaps quadruple time for the work that they did, and the Government of Canada paid them for those services. That, by its very definition, Madame Poulin, is fraud. That's an intentional act to deprive the taxpayer of funds. How many of those subcontractors is the Government of Canada working with currently? How many? Just the number.
Merci pour la question, Monsieur le Président. Donc,
Thank you for the question. Before we can conclude that there is fraud, we have to say that there is no prime contractor that submitted an invoice inaudible.
Was very specific and direct. How many subcontractors who doubled, tripled, quadrupled billing to the Government of Canada are you working with in terms of repayment agreements? Just the number, please.
Merci pour la question.
Thank you for the question. 0 is the answer.
Zero.
Zero.
Then who are you working with? And what agreements are you trying to have them sign and to repay?
So perhaps if you permit me to take a clarity on this, we have referred 7 cases to RCMP as we described. These are individuals, consultants, who have done time theft. We are negotiating or seeking a restitution from the prime. That is our contractual relationship. They are paying us back. The negotiation settlement agreement is with the prime, who's also been defrauded. We are not negotiating with the consultants. They're going right to the RCMP.
Okay, thanks for the clarification, Ms. Reza, because the impression that I received, and I'm sure taxpayers have received, is you're cutting brakes to potential fraudsters. So that is not the case. The Government of Canada is not doing that. Where there is a suspicion of fraudulent activity or any criminal activity, you are defaulting to the RCMP. Is that correct?
Oui.
Okay. Those contractors that you're working with in terms of repayment agreements, how much money has been recovered?
Merci pour la question, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you for the question. We're talking about $800,000. $420,000 has been received. $380,000 is going to be paid, and we are simply awaiting payment.
There's more money coming, as we've noted in this committee before, or at OGO. It's a 4.5 defraud. We're not stopping at 800,000. We're just seeking restitution and building the capacity. What was in individual departments now is vested in PSPC to collect it.
Okay, 800,000 potentially in total. Half of that has been repaid, correct?
Merci pour la question. Oui, on a reçu.
Yes, we've received about $400,000.
Cover the balance of the 800,000.
Donc, on a travaillé en étapes avec tout.
We've worked with the different suppliers. Some still have time to respond. I believe we're expecting final responses at the end of November.
Mr. Brock, I'll give you a few extra seconds next time to make up for it. Up next is Ms. Khalid. Or Ms. Yip, will you take the round?
Take her time then.
Very good. Ms. Yip, you have the floor for 5 minutes, please.
So, just so I understand, it was just mentioned after Mr. Brock's questions that those 7 have been referred to the RCMP, and the others have paid back, and you are still negotiating.
Let me start, if you permit, to give a little bit of a frame. We now have the data analytical tools to be able to do data mining across the Government of Canada.
I'm having difficulty hearing. No, that's okay.
So we started to go back, and we now have a new set of data analytical tools. We use all kinds of different software. We're now looking holistically across the Government of Canada to see where there is time fraud. We look at different contracts. We see the consultants underneath it. We see if they're working concurrently, for example, at the AG or PSPC, and we identify time fraud, and there's a methodology that goes with it. Those cases where we see it's intentional, there's fraud, get referred to the RCMP. Since we started to do this work, Madame Poulin has referred about 7 cases to the RCMP. There also is an association of restitution. They owe us money for the time fraud. And again, we've started to go to the contractors. Our relationship is with the prime to indicate that you had a resource that was cleared, that was doing work, that was defrauding the Crown. You have put together a restitution package, as I noted earlier, before departments would go after the fraud individually. It was not an efficient way to do it. Under the leadership of Madame Poulin, she's put together a team to go out and negotiate, advise contractors who may not know, who don't know, I think has been your experience, that they're involved or the resources they've cleared or have working are involved in fraud. So we then negotiate to get the monies back. I think this started in about June, that this approach has been.
Oui.
That process.
So there were 35 contractors that we reached out to. So I'm pleased to say that everybody has been. We have communicated with all the prime contractors, and some contractors have already agreed to pay. Some have said we will pay, and we're just awaiting for the payments. Some have asked to have a meeting with us because some wants to understand a little bit more what happened. And we have a couple that have said that they think they have no responsibilities within that and are basically refusing to pay right now. And we are waiting answers because we have given an end date to some people. You have to respond by us in such date, and they still have time to respond. So nobody is behind their date to reply to us. In fact, we have a great success in getting answers back from those prime contractors.
I think it's important to note that we have a procurement code of conduct, and vendors have to abide by it. They have to act in good faith. They can't be in conflict of interest. They can't be associated with, any criminal, any act, labor violations, and we're holding them accountable to that. That's a really important distinction. That's what we're using to proceed with.
So those vendors that refuse to pay back, how will they be dealt with?
Again, I would say they're a very small portion, but we will develop the muscle, and likely, I don't want to speak getting too ahead of ourselves, but, it'll likely end up in court.
Okay. So I'm looking at your opening statement here, and under some of the changes that you've mentioned on page 3, you talk about improving evaluation requirements to more effectively validate suppliers. How do you propose to do that?
So thank you for the question. So in the past, for example, resources would be provided. We would get the CV, but it would be at the RFP stage. So what we're doing now is that at the task authorization, we want to make sure that the people who are provided or that our names are provided are going to be the one actually working on the job. So we've been asked, for example, for signed CV. We want to make sure that the resources are properly evaluated. So those who are going to be effectively doing the work are the one for which evaluation took place. So this is one step that we're doing. More transparency in terms of resources, in terms of also the experience of those resources, making sure that we validate the experience and that each resources also give the permission. So if you're a subcontractor and your name is going to be used on the bid, we want to make sure that you gave the explicit permission to be part of that submission. So this is also something that we are taking in terms of additional step. And also I did mention the clearer task authorization, so making sure that we've got clear task authorization.
Thank you very much. That is the time. Suivant, c'est Madame Sinclair Desgagnés encore pour 2 minutes 30 secondes.
Ms. Sinclair Desgagnés for 2.5 minutes, please. Ms. Reza, I would like to come back to the contracts that were not competitive. It seems like a recurrent theme. You're satisfied with about 20% being the rate of those types of contracts at PSPC. But for those contracts that we can see on Open Government, and this was a question asked on the order paper, so it's about 4% before 2015 for such contracts. I don't think that IP or military requests were lower before 2015. So why has that number increased so significantly over time? Well, because of the pandemic. The value of vaccine contracts, for example. Well, let's look at 2015 to 2019, before the pandemic. That's 18%. So that's 5 times more contracts, and that's before the pandemic. So what's the excuse? Beyond being a little lax. I'm not sure how to respond regarding excuses. There were military contracts, and it depends on the value. There was the vaccines, not for the pandemic vaccines. Is PSPC responsible for a lot of military contracts? And for those contracts, can you say that a lot of your contracts, that the value is quite high? I can say that I'm talking about the number of contracts. I will give the floor to Dominique. For the number, it's about 20-30%, so quite a significant amount. And I don't want to question that 3-4%, but I would like to see it if we were to exclude military contracts, which are often not published. We were including it in our data, so that could have an impact on the numbers, because that seems quite high to me. 95%, that's of competitiveness. That I haven't seen that. Well, that's what's on the Open Government website. And perhaps there are contracts missing, but that's could be an even worse issue with a lack of transparency. So either the issue is a lack of transparency and contracts are not on the Open Government website as they should be and would not be respecting the government's commitment, or most contracts are there, but the data shows about 4% that were non-competitive before 2015. Perhaps we could submit a written document regarding the trends, if that's fine with you. Yes, thank you. Next.
Mrs. Arillo again, for 2.5 minutes, please. You have the floor. I believe you're on mute, Mrs. Arillo. We're not hearing you. Or maybe your mic is up high.
Maybe it's up too high. Is that better?
I think I hear you now, yes. You have 2.5 minutes, please.
Thank you. My questions are for Witness Reza, and there was some comments made there about just the processes when unfair practices are realized and seen. And in follow-up to, there has been action. We know there's still a lot of work to do. What are some of those processes that have changed in regards to unfair practices in light of what happened with ArriveCan? And certainly I'm thinking about the future for some future contracts.
So perhaps I'll start and then I'll turn to Dominique. I think what's important is also to understand that as a whole, government does $37 billion of procurement a year. That's a very big number. PSPC does $24 billion of that, and mostly the high-value contracts. We look at the procurement process, the integrity. Are we getting competition in? Are we getting information in that's able to show that there's vendor compliance? And do we know who we're doing business with? I think this is an area where I'd like to be able to turn to Dominique to talk a little bit about one key aspect of ArriveCan is vendor performance. Who is the Government of Canada doing business with and on what grounds? So we're going to be opening work on this. And Dominique, may I turn to you?
Yes, no, thank you very much.
And just before that witness speaks, if I could just ask you to frame it in this way. So we know that there's, preferred vendors, and I know that in my community, it's difficult. People tell me it's difficult to get contracts with the Government of Canada, but I always think about discrimination, and I also think about who has those networks and who's close to parliamentarians and who's close to people that work in the public service, and do they get the first point of access, and how can you level the playing field, whether it's women, people of color, Indigenous suppliers. How do you level the playing field? I'm interested in that.
I'm interested in sharing some of our experience in terms of supplier diversity and in terms of having opportunities across Canada for vendors to compete. I think that's a key piece to it as well. So, Dominique, if you could look at those three areas.
Sure. Our tool, the goal of procurement is really to promote basically more competition. So the more competition we get from small, medium-sized businesses across Canada, the greater we're going to get a best value for the taxpayer. So this is key. And we did mention tools like TBIPs, for example. I'm pleased to say that we've got over 650 vendor qualified on those. So it gives the opportunity for a small business to basically be able to bid on some government contract, get access to those posters. They're going to be seeing also the notices, so they're going to be aware that the government has some needs, some requirements, so they can also position themselves to be successful with that. Very proud also of Procurement Assistance Canada. So this is a group that reports to me. We have a DG who's very engaged. What they do is they travel across Canada. They want to meet young entrepreneurs from diverse background, diverse community, Indigenous, Black-owned minority business. So how do we make sure that those people have the opportunity to bid on the Government of Canada contracts? So we've been extremely successful, a lot of awareness, because we need also to demystify procurement. It's not an easy task, and make sure that we encourage those people to become a supplier for the federal government. So this is one element that we're covering. I know that you wanted me to touch on the vendor.
I'm going to stop you there. Well, I'm sure we'll come back to it. I'm just over my time, and I do like to give witnesses ample time to answer. But that was a good break point there, but I'm sure there'll be a follow-up question to you. Mr. McCauley, you have the floor for 5 minutes, please.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I just want to get back to the issue I was chatting about before. Now, help me out here. How does PSPC discover that there's this time theft and the general contractor is not doing that? I would think, having done large projects with contractors, the contractor, the prime contractor, is responsible. So how is it that PSPC is finding this fraud and the contractors are not? And the follow-up is GC Strategies was the prime contractor, but we went after them for a time theft issue and suspended them, but we're not doing it to the other prime contractors who seem to be suffering through the same lack of principles. And just briefly get to it, please.
Yeah, thank you for the question. So it's important to note that each prime contractor hired the resource. So there's multiple prime contractor that have hired the same resource at the same time to work on different contracts. So each of them do not know that the other ones I have hired the same resource. So because we have access to information on those multiple contracts.
If multiple have hired the same person, if three of us have hired the same person for the same work, they're not getting the work. Like, how is the contractor not aware, hey, we've hired this person for 8 hours a day, we're not getting 8 hours of work out of them?
So maybe I could talk, because I think I grilled Madame Poulin on this when she first brought it to our attention. It's often these professional service contracts is on a as-when-needed basis. So they're not working, it's not necessarily transparent to the Crown or to the supplier. It's only through the invoice and the review of the work and the sign-off that then these issues come to light.
Department's not aware they're getting robbed.
Thank you for the question. So, of course, there's an increased diligence that will need to be applied when looking at the work by the client.
Why now? Why are we just looking at this now? How is it with all the resources the government has? We have chief audit executives for every department who should be looking at risk assessments for large projects like this. How is it just now we're figuring this out?
What I can offer into that is that it's very hard because while they are a central repository for all contracts, there are no central repository for individual resources.
These groups across the whole breadth of government have been billing for services not provided, and every department is just cutting checks without verifying that this work has been done, that taxpayers have paid for. And if we did not have this Arrive scam issue come before us, we'd be sitting here right now unaware.
Just
and
on
I'm
that.
going to just finish up quickly. I have heard from CFOs who have approached me saying this is endemic through government, through big companies, large contracting companies, management consultants, where they are billing departments for the same work 3 times. Like, CFOs have approached me. It seems to be widely known in the government that this is going on. Like, how is this possible?
Thank you for the question, Mr. President. It's what we are trying to do by doing those investigations. I find important to mention, however, that those investigations have started way before ArriveCan. So the first investigation that has been referred to the RCMP has started in 2021.
But if it's so widespread, even the procurement ombudsman is looking at it. But we've found 7 out of how many tens and tens of thousands of contracts? We even have a term for it, like the bait and switch that the procurement ombudsman is looking into, and yet...
So we're conflating issues. Resource substitution is not time theft, right?
There is time theft going on.
And this is why we put the data analyticals. That's why we have done a total scrub. That's why we're working with every CFO in town. And that's why we also agree with what you're saying in the concept that if you're signing off on it, you need to have to make sure you're getting the goods. So there's an issue there, not just from the procurement lens, but throughout the project management and the FAA responsibilities.
It just seems throughout a whole of government approach to being ripped off and poor oversight. It just seems like, and I'm expressing some frustration and also disbelief because there's a lot of parliamentarians, probably a lot of people watching have business background where they actually have to check that the work is being done that we've paid for, even if it's gone through a major contractor.
Thank you, Mr. Gall. I'll allow a reply if you have a brief one. So no, I think thank you very much. Up next again, c'est encore Monsieur Drouin.
Mr. Drouin has 5 minutes.
I'm going to build a little bit on what my good friend Mr. McCauley was asking with regards to, but I'll go back to the TBIPS procurement vehicle and SBIPS. And I think when SBIPS was created back in around 09 or 08, the point was to focus on solutions that it was easier for the government to manage costs, because I think there may be some change orders that often happened through TBIPS. And I'm just wondering whether or not your department is doing the analysis. And I think the Auditor General touched on a good point as well. Understanding whether or not our obsession to ensure, and I fully respect that, to ensure that there is a fair and open, transparent, competitive process. But are the internal processes too long that sort of discourages your client departments across the government, that they, that they may not be incentivized to use the current processes in place, and may go to you and say, well, this is why we ran out of time. We need to do a sole source contract. So just if you can, I hope I was clear enough, but if you can build on that.
Okay.
So thank you for the question. I would say in terms of TBIP solution base, I would say oftentimes it takes a bit more time to do a solution-based contract, because you need to properly describe your statement of work. You need to invest into that procurement. So TBIPs is oftentimes more efficient. What we've been doing is working with clients to make sure that the resources on TBIPs don't become long-term resources. And this is, TBS also has published guidance on that. When you're going to be procuring professional services, how do you ensure that it's a fly-in, fly-out relationship? So this is what we're working on with clients, questioning also the need. Are you able also to source that resources internally as your own FTE? So those kind of key questions must be asked before we even think about getting into procurement. So.
Puis, si je peux me le permettre, juste sur TBIPS, qui fait la...
Who does the analysis to see whether or not the contract was met? Is it PSPC, or is it the client that says that the task was completed by the IT professional, for example? Who does this analysis? We offer the platform, and so the client confirms whether or not they received the services. With TBIPS, there was a task authorization. But at PSBC, we can't necessarily know. We're not in the daily operations of the client, so it's up to the client to confirm. And at that time, there will be payment. So for the technical definition, it's things that are confirmed by the client.
To kind of fuse this question about whose responsibility it is to review and ensure that they're getting the goods and the services they need, this is our client's responsibility. The fact that we're uncovering fraud is putting a very sharp point on the fact that people need to know and be accountable for what is being signed off, to ensure that we have to approach it both from finding the fraud, detecting it, deferring it, but as well as making sure that people are properly trained to to discharge their responsibilities under the FAA.
Okay, now I'm just wondering whether or not there's been some analysis done on, and I've heard Mr. Laporte mention the fact that it's longer to go towards an SBIPS procurement model sometimes. But I'm wondering if PSPC has the capacity to do an analysis in terms of understanding whether the same project or the same results can be achieved through TBIPS or SBIPS. Yes, it may take a little time to go towards a contract award, but taking that little time will manage costs. And I'm wondering whether or not you guys are doing it, some of these analysis, and whether or not you're talking to client departments to find out, hey, I had somebody within, I don't know, Health Canada working on Oracle or something, or an IT project, and I had somebody else working at ESDC on a very similar project, but but using the same technology. I don't know if you guys are all doing these analysis and are able to compare to manage costs.
En termes d'analyse, c'est sûr qu'on
We do some analyses and we want to do more, but TBIPS is quite popular, 1.7 billion on TBIPS, 150 suppliers. We have different categories as well. So yes, there's a lot of efficiencies with TBIPS versus the public market. And to make a link here with fraud, there's the new timesheets that are much more precise, and so we suggest to departments that they use these new timesheets, so not to bill 7.5 hours without knowing what was billed for what services. TBIPS and SBIPS allow us to prevent fraud, work with the client. TBS is also raising awareness with the managers and with Section 34. And so there's a responsibility linked to all of this, and it is up to managers to ask questions to ensure that when a timesheet is signed, verification has been done prior. So we want our clients to be more disciplined with their contractors. Thank you.
Beginning now our fourth and final round, Mr. Brock, you have the floor for 5 minutes, please.
So let's recap for Canadians some of the important details of this scandal. We have former Minister of Public Safety Mendicino, who is on record saying he wanted someone's head on a platter in terms of who chose GC Strategies. We have Min Doan, a former senior executive at CBSA, who deleted 4 years' worth of emails 3 days after an ATIP requesting information on GC Strategies was received by the CBSA. We have the highest level at both CBSA and PSPC involved in what was supposed to be an independent investigation. We've had senior officials appointed by our very own Prime Minister come to these committees and mislead, if not outright lie to committee. We have all the hallmarks of a cover-up and scapegoating going on in front of us. And I say that because I'm mindful of Ms. Hogan's, the Auditor General's comments that there are multiple layers of responsibility here. But I guess I can ask anyone at PSPC here, has anyone been suspended or fired in relation to the mishandling of the ArriveCan scandal? Yes or no?
We can only speak to the PSPC department,
Yes.
and nobody has been fired. or
Didn't
suspended.
surprise me at all. So what we have is we have two individuals, two mid-level to lower individuals at CBSA, Cameron McDonald, Antonio Utano, who have been scapegoated by the CBSA into accepting responsibility for the multiple problems exposed by this at least $60 million scandal, according to the Auditor General. It could be substantially more, but because of the abysmal paperwork at the CBSA and PSPC, she could only offer a guesstimate. So those two individuals had been suspended, at one point suspended without pay. No one else has been suspended, no one else has been terminated, no one else has been outright fired for their incompetence in handling this particular scandal. Now, I want to spend some time on Min Doan. Ms. Hogan, were you made aware prior to the release of the ArriveCan report that there was 4 years of missing emails from a senior CBSA executive, Min Doan, prior to publishing that report?
So yes, my audit team was made aware of the fact that there were emails that were no longer recoverable, and I think there are many reasons why emails aren't available. My fundamental view is that a contracting file should be complete, and a public servant should ensure that everything that needs to be maintained is in the contracting file, not in transitory documents.
And
like
if I could
emails.
stop you right there, Min Doan testified at committee. He lied several times at committee and claims, given his senior level and his experience with computers, that he had to change the battery on his laptop, and mysteriously, 4 years' worth of emails disappeared. and therefore he was unable to confirm through documentary evidence that it was he and he alone that made the ultimate decision to hire the pariah GC Strategies, who fleeced the taxpayer to the tune of almost $60 million. Now, do you view, as the Auditor General, the act of deletion of emails to be a policy breach by the CBSA?
Yes, I think if emails are of value to government business, they should not be deleted. They should be, in fact, saved to demonstrate due diligence and accountability.
And would you view that, in the normal course of your duties as an Auditor General, as rising to the level of suspicion, which is your mandate, suspicion of criminality, warranting a referral to the RCMP to investigate Min Doan?
So I think this situation with ArriveCan was very unique. The RCMP was already investigating the branch at the CBSA and many of the actors, and that's why I did not make any referrals, but we have been cooperating with the RCMP and will continue to do so.
Okay. Have you cooperated to the extent of raising suspicion about 4 years' worth of emails being deleted by Min Doan, someone whose specialty is computers and would have the responsibility, one of his mandates, to preserve that level of evidence? Have you made that referral to the RCMP, yes or no?
So out of respect for the ongoing investigation and the RCMP, I prefer not to comment on the conversations that we've been having with them about
Thank you very much. That is your time. I understand we'll come back to Mr. Brock. Following up is Mr. Erskine Smith. You have the floor for 5 minutes, please.
Thanks very much. I want to follow up on Mr. Brock's questions to some extent, although I got to be honest, I share concerns around the deleted emails. I think it's outrageous that emails would be deleted and it's not possible to recover them. Similarly, I think it's outrageous that you've got apparent kickbacks to civil servants who are responsible for drafting terms of an RFP in close contact with the very company that ultimately is awarded that procurement. So in that contract. So, the frustration that I have is that there are fingers pointed one way and then there are fingers pointed the other way. There are multiple internal investigations that have been undertaken here. So I asked the Auditor General questions, maybe from procurement's perspective to the Deputy Minister. Everything that you and your team have presumably done a deep dive to say what happened here. And when I ask who's culpable, I don't just mean who's responsible for signing the document. And Ms. Hogan sort of said, well, the executive director is ultimately responsible. Yeah, sure. But culpability is to assign blame. And so not who is responsible for signing on the dotted line, who is to blame for what happened with ArriveCan.
Thank you very much for the question, Mr. Chair. That is a very difficult question to parse out. The Auditor General, the Procurement Ombudsman report did not find the smoking gun of who. I have gone before OGO committee and have indicated that I authorized 2 of the first contracts. I did it based on a very strong rationale, and I've submitted that paperwork to both committees. And we spoke earlier about the fact that I used to be a PSPC. I certainly, when I saw the request for, I think, $2 and $4 million contracts each to keep the border open so Canadians would have access to critical supplies during the time, to protect the frontline officers that literally are the first point of interaction, these were things that were on my mind when I looked at that rationale. And I certainly did ask, why this company? The response back was that CBSA had worked with them, that CBSA had knowledge of them, and I took that at face value. What have I learned? That
sorry. So that is appreciated. But sitting where you are today, not at the time where you're signing off on it in the first instance, but you're sitting here today, the benefit of hindsight, the benefit of internal investigations, and the benefit of a mountain of testimony and evidence along the way. Who's to blame for ultimately having a contractor that inflated their work and cost the taxpayer an insane amount of money for what was ultimately rendered?
As you alluded to in I think some of your commentary, that there are a lot of investigations ongoing. I am not well placed to provide or to provide any further views because I cannot speculate on it.
So I guess from procurement's perspective, are there investigations that that are under your authority that are ongoing?
Here I'll turn to Catherine.
Thank you so much for the question. So since we received a preliminary fact findings report from CBSA, many actions have been taken by the department. As it was previously mentioned by both the deputy and my colleagues, we have looked into some of those findings. And we mentioned that some companies have been suspended from the procurement processes, as well as some companies that have lost their security clearances in that process. It's also important to mention that many of those investigations are not completed yet. And it's an important process to complete an investigation and to wait for those final findings.
And I appreciate that. So, but just on that, so you were able to take some remedial action on the basis of the preliminary fact findings. Is there any basis to assign blame to individual civil servants responsible who participated in the procurement process for ArriveCAN on the basis of those preliminary fact findings?
Thank you for the question. So it will be premature to conclude if we have not completed the investigation.
So that's okay. So if it's premature, so when can we expect the investigation to be completed?
I can only speak for what we are doing at PSPC. So I'm sure you are aware that the main investigation is under the responsibility of CBSA. At PSPC, we have some internal investigation, one of which covering a departmental employee, and we are in the final stage of that investigation.
Thank you very much. That is the time. Encore une fois, Madame Sinclair Desgagnés pour 2 minutes 30 secondes.
Ms. Sinclair Desgagnés, thank you for clarifying, because I was a little surprised when I heard that you hadn't suspended anyone. But that was not what Ms. Daly had said during testimony, who had received an email saying that she was being put on leave. So it's a bit of a semantic difference there. So an employee was suspended while there is a PSPC investigation. Is that correct? Yes. Thank you. I love that kind of answer. Ms. Reza, regarding previous questions, during the pandemic, and you shared justifications, you signed contracts for GC Strategies, but it bears mentioning that when we look at emails between PSPC and the CBSA, there was Ms. Durgan, one of your employees, that had raised doubts regarding justifications being inadequate for a contract of a few $1 million to GC Strategies. That employee received an answer, and it's as if all she needed to do was check a box. Receiving justification and the content wasn't actually important. And then after that, PSPC approved the contract. I know that at your level you're not looking at details, but that means that in the chain of events at PSPC, there's a moment where, when PSPC needs to ensure that contracts are properly awarded, well, that wasn't well done. What will be meaningfully different, and I'm hoping that this won't happen again, but if there's another emergency, what would be different? I think that there are 3 questions there. I didn't sign the contracts. That's one clarification. Inaudible. I gave approval, but I did not sign. There are 3 levels. I just wanted to share that nuance there, that I didn't sign. Secondly, it is up to the client the Auditor General talked about the executive director. It's up to the client to give the justification for something being non-competitive. It was during the pandemic, and it's not the contracts that were non-competitive that attracted the attention of the procurement ombudsman or of the Auditor General. It was those that were supposedly competitive. And third, we created a list of what we had seen during the pandemic to avoid such a situation during a future crisis. Disruption of the supply chain, what do we do? Disruption in the quality and pricing of a contract, corruption and fraud, and when it's non-competitive and a contract is renewed. I know that we will be factoring in what we experienced to make improvements. If there's another crisis and I'm still Deputy Minister, if my department says it's an emergency for professional services, I will react differently. Hopefully we won't see that. Thank you very much.
Ms. Cirillo, again, for your last questioning period of 2.5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and my questions again for Witness Reza. And I just wanted to ask about there was some mention today about potentially lack of training or lack of following of rules. And I know that the Professional Institute of the Public Service of Canada has been talking about this for years, that the knowledge base, especially as it relates to IT, is eroding within the public service, and there's more and more reliance on outsourcing. So I can read something here that they've stated that government outsourcing, especially outsourcing of IT personnel, is costing Canadians billions of dollars each year. From time to time, outsourcing may be necessary to augment staff complements or bring in external skills and expertise, but years of unchecked spending on outsourcing has created a shadow public service of consultants operating alongside the government workforce. And I would add that they go on to say that there is gender inequality across Canada's public service. In IT, lucrative contracts are doled out to male-dominant industry that has notoriously struggled with gender equity, while at the same time, lower paid and precarious temporary service contracts are disproportionately filled by women. So what I wanted to ask is, how has the hollowing out of expertise in the public service affected the value of Canadian taxpayers? And also, too, how does this, and I call it in Parliament, gentlemen's agreements, dominated how contracts are handed out and doled out within the public service?
Thank you very much. I'm not crazy about, if you permit, the word dole, but we'll come back to that in a moment. As I have said at previous committees, I look at service delivery to Canadians with a three-legged stool. There has to be government staffing, HR, do we have the right complement, and training. Project management, especially in the IT space, as you all know, we have many old systems, and transitioning to something new is extremely complex with risk from the cybersecurity, from cloud. So we need to make sure that we have the right skill set internally, and then the procurement. Where can we augment where necessary with professional services to make sure we have that capacity? I do think it's a three-legged stool. We can't bring in the right folks if we don't have the right HR strategy and we're attracting the right talent. We need to look at our project management, especially in IT, and make sure, in fact, I just had this discussion earlier or last week with the unions around making sure that our staff are well trained to avoid having a dependency on professional services. Since I've been
why my question really is, like, how is this move to outsourcing, why did it happen, and how is it affecting Canadian taxpayers?
And I'm afraid, Deputy Minister, you have time just for a brief answer, please.
I'm not sure it's a move. I think that looking at having a procurement in terms of having resources for the efficiency of service delivery and mandate development has always been a toolkit. The public service is right now many FTEs are there. It's finding the right balance, the right skill set, the right training.
Thank you very much.
And the right rigor to deliver the service to Canadians.
Thank you very much. Mr. McCauley, it's your last 5 minutes, please.
Thanks, Chair. AG Hogan, can you update us on the progress of the GC Strategies audit that you're doing right now? or Mr. Hayes?
Yep, thank you. So we have started that audit. We've signaled to the central agencies that we are doing it, and indeed, I have to acknowledge that we're very happy with the collaboration we're receiving from Public Service Procurement Canada on this. At this point, we're identifying how far back we're going to be able to go on the basis of the records that are retained by government. Of course, there are document retention policies. There might not be things much.
The one retaining those documents, I guess, but.
We're looking across the entire government at the records that are retained. And of course, we will expand to Crown corporations. It's a little bit more complex to get all of the Crown corporations because they are individuals, so we will be reaching out to them in the near future. Obviously, we recognize that there's great interest in understanding the universe of contracts that were awarded to GC Strategies, their principals, and any other derivatives. So we're going to try to accelerate that work as much as we can.
Ballpark finish date?
We're hoping to have some information that would be valuable to Parliament as soon as possible. We recognize the time pressures that parliamentarians are looking at.
Thanks. Mr. Reza, I just want to get back again to, as you probably imagine, this issue with the main contractors, I guess, being robbed by their subcontractors and therefore the taxpayers getting ripped off. Just curious, like, what are the departments saying when they are finding out that they're paying for services that haven't been delivered? And what are these general contractors saying?
Well, I can tell you that PSPC, I think, was one of the defrauded departments, and I'm very interested to understand, you know, when you're signing an invoice and you're signing off that you've received the goods, you know, is there an issue that is overestimated? Is it an issue that, you know, they're working 10, 12-hour days? It's getting to the bottom line and reinforcing, because this is about project management and it's about financial controls. It is not necessarily a procurement issue. It is the technical authority.
The general contractors who, say you've got 3 of them, each getting billed 8 hours a day by one person, like, how are they justifying it? Like, how are they justifying it to the departments and therefore the taxpayers? I've been paying out money on your behalf for work that hasn't been done.
Thank you for the question. So important to mention once again that each prime contractor only bill once for that resource. So the resource is being billed by another prime contractor to another department. So
right. But somewhere along the lines, if one scam artist is billing the taxpayers 24 hours to 3 different contractors, we are not getting 24 hours of work. So how is it the contractor is not aware, and how is it the departments are not aware? Because if you look at the work being done right now on, say, Center Block, if you hire a carpenter to do X amount of work, he can't be billing for 24 hours of work for what is obviously just 8 hours. How is this slipping by not only the contractors, but also the departments?
Thank you so much for the question. So as you mentioned, it's not arriving with carpenters. So that's why all those fraudulent billing arrive in professional services and IT professional services. So again, each department is looking at its own view, and each prime contractor.
Yes, but what you seem to be missing is these contractors are paying out for work that is not being done.
I would agree with you.
Right. So why are these contractors doing it? This is the contractors either defrauding government or being completely negligent, in which case they should be fired or banned from doing work with government. How is this going on, and why have we not terminated these contractors?
I think, the resources, often the prime is unaware because, again, it goes back to some of the issues we've seen in ArriveCan. If the deliverables aren't tight, if it's not clear, the contractor themselves may not know, and if the bill is being submitted, the invoice, and the department setting up. What you're pointing to is an issue, 100%. So from a procurement perspective, we're going after restitution. How we educate the contractors, because it's also their responsibility, as I've alluded to, it has a code of conduct. I'm saying it's the responsibility of
We
contractors.
should
but
be
it's
Thank you.
going after these.
Mr. McCauley, that is your
also
time.
the responsibility of the Crown to make sure
Mr.
they're signing
yeah.
off and getting the value.
Okay, yeah, I think you got the answer. Very good. I was going to allow a response there, but I think Mr. McCauley received his answer. And our last member, Ms. Yip, you have the floor for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Chair. So I'll direct this to PSPC. Have you been contacted by the RCMP at all?
So our responsibility is when we find element of criminality in a case, is to refer that to the RCMP. After that, they are responsible for the file, and it's with them to decide the next step into the case.
Okay, so not in any situation has the RCMP contacted yourselves, right?
Yeah.
It's just in this case that you have reported to the RCMP.
Yes, so we're reporting to the RCMP. If they have questions on file, they can come to us afterwards. They have a direct contact with the investigative team. I will not be aware of those situations because they have access directly to the investigative team.
And if I could add, outside of like file specific, and there are obviously some other elements to it, PSBC, the Competition Bureau, and the RCMP run a tip line for contractors. It's a very important tip line. We've seen an increase. We advertise it. We look at it. It's an opportunity where there's wrongdoing, fraud, integrity issues for people to report. So we have a very close relationship with partners in this area.
You wouldn't have the number for the tip line to tell us all now, would you?
For the question, I will have to come back to you. We have quarterly dashboard, but unfortunately, I didn't think of bringing one with me. But we are monitoring that tip line and reporting on the nature of those tips. Are we seeing trends? Is there valuable information that can be actioned through those tips? So we're paying great attention, and we have colorful dashboard, but I do not have this with me at the moment. I'm sorry.
Thank you. Is there anything that has been said over so many meetings and testimonies that you would like to clarify, whether it's today or from the past?
That's a very generous offer because, as you can see, I brought my binders of committee testimony. There's so many different elements to it, and making sure that we're, I hear words like not being truthful. I've been coming to Parliament since 2010. I have told the truth at every committee. My first committee was on organized crime, and I continue to do so. And I think that we try to be credible and helpful. So in terms of any specific issue, I do want to go back a little bit on one comment about the sole source contracts versus, the competitive one. As far as I know, the AG's concern were not in the non-competitive. We, of course, look at the various elements. We continually strive to always be competitive. One of the issues I didn't get a chance to come back on was the issue of, often there's so much back and forth and challenge function, it would have been faster to compete it. I think that's a key element. The other issue I want to come across to parliamentarians and Canadians is these professional service contracts where staff augmentation, they don't necessarily have a control, not from a procurement perspective, but from a project management perspective. And so that is where I think we need to do a better job being able to articulate and keep very tight in terms of deliverables to avoid situations like we've been talking about. Mais je vais me tourner ici pour...
Maybe just to say also, we spoke a lot about vendor performance and value for Canadians. So very, very pleased also to inform that basically we're launching our vendor performance management system by which we're going to be going after poor performer and rewarding also good performers. So it means that in future contract for future procurement, your past performance will be a component that will be used to assess. So we're starting with a few selected for procurement with respect to professional services. But this is something I'll know that was long awaiting by the OPO has been brought up. So we're going to be launching that this month in terms of implementing vendor performance management. So very pleased to report that to the committee.
Thank you for the question. I will have that. It's important to note that we have a solid framework to combat wrongdoing in procurement. I think I've mentioned that previously in one of that committee, where we have 3 pillars in terms of prevention, detection, and response to those incidents. And as mentioned by my colleague, there's a lot of improvement that has been done in many aspects of this. And the detection of the case that are discussed at this committee are a result of those improvement within the system. So while we prefer to have preventive measures, detective measures are also part of a great framework. And I will end by saying that the Deputy Minister mentioned it in her opening remark. We have launched the Office of Supplier Integrity and Compliance back in March, and this is a very good progress towards making sure that we know the supplier with whom we are doing business and that we're taking actions when there's a situation that needs our response to make sure that we offer the best services for Canadians. So,
thank you very much. That is brief.
I will be very brief, but just to say, just framing your question, having your responsibility for procurement at the federal level is a big driver for socioeconomic change in Canada. And I worry with this view that the procurement system is broken, that it's corrupt and fraud. It is not the reality. So I just want to be clear. We had 2 clean audits on PPE and vaccines. This is an area we are continuing to work on it, but I do want to make sure Canadians understand it because it's an important part of our GDP. Procurement is 14%.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. I want to thank Ms. Hogan, the Office of the Auditor General, and Ms. Reza, Department of Public Works and Government Services for your testimony and appearance today, as well as participation to the study of Report 1 ArriveCAN. We soumettre des informations supplémentaires.
You can submit any additional answers to the clerk.
Ms. Zerillo, I just want to flag something to you. You had some questions off the top that while witnesses couldn't answer today, I'm going to work with you and Mr. Cannings because Blake Desjardins, who's a member of this committee, had some questions around some pension investment. So you're at the right place. And I appreciate it. I give members latitude to ask questions. You did so today, but you're at the right place for some of these questions. So we have meetings coming up on public accounts, and I'll work with the NDP to try to schedule the right person for your party to ask some questions. So you'll hear back from either myself, the clerk, or the analyst on that, and we'll work with Mr. Cannings. Just wanted to highlight yes to you. On that, I will adjourn the meeting. Have a nice evening, everyone.